Tomorrow marks the start of Pride Month. When I found out we'd be debating the argument that there might be strains in the LGBTQ community on the show tonight, I've got to be honest, my heart sank a little bit. And that's not because of any issues I've got with this. It's just that as a straight woman, I feel it's not my debate. I also have many friends, many family members and loved ones in my life that are gay or might identify with this community, as I'm sure you do too. And I always carry them with me in my mind when I approach these topics. You know how it goes at the moment. Quote, when we were growing up, it was just LGB, you hear. Now it's LGBTQ+, etc. Or even questions about why is there a whole Pride Month? Now, no matter your personal views, social media algorithms will no doubt be serving you this type of commentary at the moment. And when you read that or listen to that, does it leave you feeling wiser and more tolerant or suspicious and confused? Did the actions of the trans activists protesting outside the Oxford Union speech yesterday move you in any direction, or is your mind on other things at the moment? An argument is now being made in some quarters that extreme members of the trans community are alienating support for the wider collective that has done so much to improve the position of minorities in this country and around the world. So tonight, we're going to be asking members of the LGBTQ community, or the Rainbow Alliance as they're sometimes called, if they feel at risk from radical and extreme voices within, or is this simply a further attack on trans people? I think it is best that we hear from people in the community and understand what it all means to them. And before we go on, let's remember that Pride Month honours the Stonewall Uprising in New York in 1969. That happened when violent tensions between police and patrons of a gay bar in Manhattan led to days of protests and unrest. It was actually a watershed moment in a movement that led to the gay pride marches that we see around the world today, mostly in tolerant Western countries. A lot of us were familiar with that. It's also an annual moment to remember people who fought and fight for the right to live as they are. Now, I say all this because it is a sensitive subject. You can tell I know that it is. And I'm pleased to say, joining me to debate all this evening is social media influencer Ollie London, a man who is in the process of detransitioning from a trans woman back to a man, and also by veteran LGBTQ activist Peter Tatchell and comedian and radio presenter James Barr, familiar face on this show as well. Also joining us down the line, Bev Jackson, co-founder of LGB Alliance, which promotes the rights of lesbians, bisexuals and gay men. Bev, thank you ever so much. We're going to start in the studio. I want to come to all of you. Join me here. You heard what I just said there. Peter, coming to you first. Am I over-egging it by saying I'm not allowed to talk about this because I'm a straight woman?
I think you're entitled to your point of view. But obviously, please listen to what LGBT plus people are saying. On this particular issue, it is very clear there are more than 1,000 LGBT plus organisations in the UK, mostly LGB, lesbian, gay and bisexual, and almost without exception, they support including trans people within our coalition. And trans people have been here right from the beginning. They were outside the Stonewall Inn protesting in 1969, which saw the birth of the modern lesbian and gay liberation movement. They were also in the London Gay Liberation Front in 1970 and 71, when we began all that half a century and more ago. So trans people have always been part of our community, and we think we should all stick together. United we stand, divided we fall.
James, coming to you because you're nodding along there. So then is it spurious to even suggest that there are these arguments happening, that there are divisions or strains?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely disagree with what you were saying. I don't think there are divisions or strains within our community. I think there's a small faction of people outside of the community who want to create a moral panic about trans people for no reason other than the fact that they are hiding behind that to push forwards their right-wing agenda. And actually, it disgusts me because we have a lot of rights in this country as LGBTQ plus people. It's outrageous to suggest that we close the door behind us and stop trans people getting through as well.
Now, one of my sort of thoughts when I was approaching this show this evening was that we didn't have a trans person who is remaining trans coming to be part of this debate. So I've heard from you both on this, but obviously, Ollie, you are in the process of detransitioning from trans. So I don't know whether the trans community will feel they have.
I think I just want to interrupt there, and Ollie, you can disagree, but is it not right to say that you're detransitioning from being transracial, not transgender? Did you ever come out as transgender?
I was transgender.
How long were you transgender for?
For a year.
Because I'd argue that if you were a transgender woman, you're therefore a woman. And if you're saying you're not transgender now, therefore you were never transgender.
No, I struggled with my identity my whole life. And, you know, it's the trans community. They're always saying, oh, you shouldn't question someone if they feel trans, if that's how they identify. You're not allowed to question them. So why, because I detransition, why would you question
I'm
my
not questioning that. And I'm
identity?
sorry that you went through that, but that doesn't mean that everyone has the same experience as you.
Correct. Everybody has a different experience and they're entitled to that. But my issue is the trans activists that have hijacked the LGBT community and are causing real harm to the LGBT community by pushing gender ideology on children, by forcing women out of women's spaces. That is my issue. I don't have an issue with trans people. I have many trans friends. My issue is with the radical gender ideology.
So do you think there is case for the argument then that this show is premised around this evening, that there is a bit of strain in the community?
There's definitely strain. I mean, look, there are people that say that sexuality and gender identity should not be conflated. And I think the real issue is the more extreme elements of the trans activists that are pushing this agenda, that are pushing for all these things on children, pushing for hormones on kids and puberty blockers. That's the real issue.
But again,
and I
didn't
think
you
that
spend like
causes harm to-
£75,000 on surgery to look like a member of
That's
BTS?
what-
So
that's
should we not
what
be talking about
causes-
BTS indoctrinating
But
children
then you
to
could
look
say
a
the same
certain
about
way?
someone that's non-binary. You know, you could say, are they not allowed to identify as how they feel? That's all I was
No,
doing.
I'm just
I was
really
using,
suggesting that
I was
you're
using the
saying
same
that-
logic. I'm using the same logic as woke people. You can identify as anywhere LGBTQI plus 2S, Two-Spirit. If somebody can identify as Two-Spirit, I can choose whatever I want. I was struggling with my identity. I've dealt with those issues, and now I'm trying to help children. The LGBT community should be coming together to help children, to find a solution, to support trans people as well, people that have struggled their whole life.
But in your
I
journey-
support that, but we also need to respect women. Men shouldn't be in women's spaces. Men shouldn't be in women's sports. We need to respect all people.
I'm going to come to Bev now because Bev has also been kind enough to join us this evening. You've been listening to that. I hope you heard all of it, Bev.
Yeah, I've been,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
With
Respond.
great interest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to join in this discussion. I'd like to respond to a few of the things, but first I think I should clear up that the title is perhaps a little bit misleading. I think this is not a question about the LGB dropping the T, but why the T was added to LGB in the first place. And people perhaps think that it's always been there, but in fact, in the UK, it was only added in 2015. And no lesbians were consulted at the time. The consultation was all with trans groups. And I think you would have found that lesbians would have been very unhappy. In fact, many lesbians were unhappy when they discovered that the T was added. LGB is about relationships. It's about love, it's about sex, it's about who you're attracted to. Are you attracted to men? Are you attracted to women? Or are you attracted to both? It's very clear sexual orientation. T and Q and all the other letters that have been added since then are about identity issues. They're completely separate, and it's caused a lot of confusion. We've seen how much confusion it's caused with Labour politicians trying desperately to avoid saying what a woman is, and that's quite comic. But it's also caused a lot of tragedy, particularly for lesbians. It's no coincidence that LGBT Alliance was founded by Kate Harris and me, two lesbians, and our CEO is a lesbian, and also the chair of the board is a lesbian. It's lesbians who have suffered from the addition of the T to LGB. And I think your subtitle perhaps should be reading "Campaigners argue that the gay community has been hijacked." But anyway, so what has happened with lesbians? Let me explain why I'm saying that it's a tragedy for lesbians. What we're seeing at the moment, and you can look, that thousands, hundreds of thousands of lesbians are having their breasts removed. You can see tens of thousands fundraising on GoFundMe to have their breasts removed. And this is because it's no longer cool to be lesbian. In fact, I spoke to a 19-year-old recently who said that throughout her secondary school, she'd been told she must be a boy. She must be a boy because she fell for girls. This is the kind of homophobia that is being taught at schools, taught online and spread by peers, so that lesbians don't feel comfortable about being lesbian anymore. This kind of homophobia is a real tragedy. And in fact, the fact that it is being propagated, I think it calls for a public inquiry. How is it possible? 10 years ago, you would have been thought a bit weird if you'd said that men can change into women and women can change into men. And these days, you're called weird if you deny it. The fact is, you can't change sex. Children shouldn't be taught that they can change sex. It's like teaching them, they can fly.
Bev.
They might jump out of the window and find they can't fly.